Hello, hello, hello. We are doing the live thing tonight. Give a moment for the people to join, and then we shall commence the conversation. Oh, I got that where I want it. Oh, let's see. Oh, I need that to stay put. Why won't that stay put? There we go. Move that up there. All right. It has been a moment since we've had conversations on here, but tonight we pick things up to discuss technology and what it's like to work in tech, and what it's like to be in tech, and it's what it's like to have tech skills. So, as always, drop your questions in the comment box, and we can start this evening's conversation. Hello, all of you good people, for joining. Want to talk about tech? Want to learn about tech? Feel free to get in on the conversation. And while that is going on, let's see. Pull up my website because I know a lot of these questions that typically come through on the live are recurring questions. So what I want to try to do is to build out a resource or resources that can answer those questions and then reference you all to those questions as they relate to tech. Any other questions outside the bounds of tech? Probably not so much. How y'all doing this Thursday evening? As Justin Timberlake says, it's gonna be May. But it actually is May now. So that joke probably doesn't hit as hard as it did on April 30th. Rate your expertise in Linux. I'm gonna say a 6, maybe even a 7. I wouldn't call myself system administrator level, but I'm very familiar with Linux. I can navigate file systems and a whole bunch more. G Dizzle, you had any other questions related to Linux? Since you asked that one question. Yeah, keep coming on in. If you like working in tech or like being in tech or you just like talking about tech, drop a like. Do you know anything about the cybersecurity field? I know a little bit. What question do you have related to cybersecurity? Moose catcher. Pat Dewdrop. Is PHP still going strong in the job market? Not so much in the job market, but it is strong in freelance work. Unless you have a job doing WordPress, you're probably not going to see that full time. But freelance projects, there are a lot of websites that exist as freelance projects that are built on PHP, in addition to WordPress, which is built on PHP. And there are several other content management systems that are designed to run on PHP platforms. Moose Catcher, what question, or did you have another question related to cybersecurity? 720s, dude, I did a cybersecurity for 2 years, but didn't like it and switched to a good field. Yeah, and to be honest, that could be any field in IT, because everything is not for everybody. I don't do cybersecurity, but I understand the concepts behind it. And that's what I go with that. Linux user, what's your favorite Linux distro for software development? So I use Ubuntu. I have used Red Hat in a previous role. I did not use it extensively, but Linux, regardless of what distro you use, for the most part, they are the same. But like I said, in my personal setup, it is Ubuntu. I have a Raspberry Pi. It has a Raspbian is based on Raspberry Pi OS is what they call it now. They used to call it Raspbian, but that's based on Debian. So if it's a Debian based system, I'm pretty comfortable with it. Any advice for individuals seeking internships? This time of year is probably not it. You are better off waiting until the fall because of the fact the way the recruiting cycle works. They typically recruit for summer internships in the fall. So you interview for your internship. Well, you go to, hypothetically, the path that at least I'm aware of is that you go to the why won't this do right? Okay. So for internships, the path is typically you go to a career fair in the fall. They start interviewing you in the fall, and in the following spring, you do all your paperwork in the spring, and then you do your summer internship through the summer. That being said, if you're looking for an internship now, you're probably too late. Are you a software engineer? Yes. Software engineer, programmer? Yes. All of that. Exactly. Consistent learning is maddening. Yes. You have to be able to always willing to be learning something in IT because otherwise you'll get behind, and that applies to Moore's Law. Am I hiring? No, I am not hiring. I have a full-time job, but then I also do a business. I do some freelance stuff, so I am not hiring. Do you contribute to open source projects? Yes, when I do see issues. I'm not a heavy contributor to open source projects, but I do talk about them, and I do, if I see an issue or identify an issue with it, I will report that issue accordingly. May I add you on LinkedIn? Yes. You can find me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/n/KRobinsonTech. And I know that's a mouthful, but that's the URL. Keep the questions coming. And also, give me a like. I appreciate those that have liked thus far. Well, the questions you all have for this evening. This will run till the top of the hour. So I may let this run over a little bit longer, but top of the hour is the allotted time that I've allocated. Since we're talking about open source projects, I do have some stuff related to Falcon Pi Player, which is associated with the Christmas light stuff. I trying to build a plugin out. Haven't finished it yet, but that's the plan, is to build it out. I have made some customizations using that open source software to be able to accommodate what I want my Christmas lights to be able to do. And so from that, it has worked out fairly well. I did find a bug in it when the lights started changing this past go round, but since then, haven't had any issues. So yeah, any questions, feel free. Drop those down below. As for hiring, let's see, I answered that. Have you tried to install a distro like Arch? No. I learned Ubuntu and I stuck with it. I have used Xbuntu, and there's a lightweight version called Lubuntu, but I pretty much stay in that family of Linux distros for at least for my personal setups. Details on breaking into healthcare coding field with no experience. I would suggest that you gotta have something, because getting into healthcare coding, I'm assuming you mean software coding and not necessarily medical coding, because medical coding is not the same thing as software coding. That said, you would need some sort of experience, especially if you need some sort of programming experience. They're not just going to let you go in there and start building out MRI machines with no experience, because you might code the wrong thing and medical malpractice. Jay says, I'm getting started into tech with my first year of college in the fall. What languages should I learn first? So my go-to is what I tell people is C Sharp, C++, or Java is the first three. Once you learn sufficiently, and you ain't got to dominate in those, but once you learn those sufficiently, then you can expand from there. And I say those three because those three typically give you the basic foundations of what programming is like. You also understand object-oriented programming, and you also understand strongly typed variables and objects. Thoughts on modern JS libraries? I only library, if you will, is that I'm familiar with is TypeScript. I don't use React. I don't use Angular. I don't use any of those things. I started programming before JavaScript was as it is now. That being said, I can do TypeScript. TypeScript is sufficient. TypeScript is familiar because it's oftentimes structured in an object-oriented manner. But as for the others, I really can't speak to those. Excuse me. How much did you know when you started your first job in the field? A lot. Primarily because of the fact I practiced it web development when I was in high school. You know, I had like a site on GeoCities, and from that, it would just go from there. So yeah, learning GeoCities and learning how to do HTML and CSS and those things in those days, I then expanded to doing more software programming because of the classes I was taking in college, and now I primarily build websites and web applications. Ike, I'm having problems with my PHP project giving to me at school. I'm assuming given, not giving. That being said, you want to consider using either Copilot or ChatGPT to assist you out with whatever issue that is. You can put the exact code snippet into there and say, hey, this is not working, it is doing, and then whatever, or I'm getting so-and-so error. ChatGPT, I know will do for sure, will tell you, okay, this is what you need to fix, or this is what you need to change, or it will just rewrite the whole thing entirely so that it works. C Sharp Gang, I'm an engineer in manufacturing and love using .NET for use in factories. Yes, I primarily do C Sharp, but in my open source projects or freelance projects, sometimes I do PHP because of the fact it is easier to set up a web host that supports PHP than it is to set up something with C Sharp or some other technology. Let's see. Okay, 29 says it also works with MRI. Okay. Yeah, so you got with the healthcare coding thing, you got to have some experience programming in general. I'm not going to say what language would be best because one, I don't work in the healthcare field, so I can't really speak to exactly what technologies or languages that they're using. But I will say you need some experience because they're not, like I said, they're not just going to let you go in there and start coding out an MRI machine. Thoughts on learning Python first? So I typically despise Python in that regard because of the fact Python, like JavaScript, is a scripting language. It's not a programming language in the traditional sense. Thus, it allows you to get away with a lot of things that a object-oriented programming language would not let you get away with. And that's why I typically don't suggest Python as a first language. Now, I know some people, they dominate and they learn Python, but the biggest issue that I've seen is when you learn Python first and then you go to a C# or a Java, you struggle because of the fact the structure of those languages are completely different. Seabiscuit, I'm tired, boss. 5 years of corporate software engineering has burnt me out. What jobs if I want to coast? I mean, you could go into application support. That requires you being on call, depending on how that structure is set up. You could do a data analysis. There are a number of other things you can pivot to that you can still use your existing skill set with. Yeah, GeoCities, a long while ago. Would you, Blinkly, would you recommend PHP in the modern day? What about something like Elixir with Phoenix? So I can't speak to the last two, but PHP is still relevant. I say that because of the fact content management systems like WordPress are still existing and still functioning, and there are a lot of WordPress sites that still exist. That being said, PHP is still relevant, contrary to popular belief. However, it's probably not going to be used in an enterprise setting because of the fact it is not necessarily an enterprise language. It's more of a freelance type deal. Will AI take over programmer jobs? No. Any certifications that you recommend? That it's a very wide, open-ended questions because cybersecurity certifications are not the same as those that would be needed for a software developer. So you're going to have to narrow that one down. Can you really include Bootstrap in that? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Tony. I have no experience. If I have no experience, how long of training school to get a job in coding and programming? Now, you can do like some people do and take a boot camp, which I do not advise taking a boot camp. You could go and get an associate's degree. An associate's degree typically is 2 years. If you were to try to fast track that, you could probably get it down to about 1.5 years. There are some people that do take year-long boot camps, but again, I am not a fan of boot camps. I am a fan of degrees. Granted, degrees in some corporations do not carry the same weight. So keep that in mind. What are the best way, put that back. What are the best ways to get into a tech field? Obviously the skills, but how can I network? You can start on LinkedIn. You can also start by joining Facebook groups related to the various technologies or even various communities. There are several groups that I'm in that are related to, and this is not to be racial or anything, but there are several groups that I'm in related to black people that are in tech. If there are some related to whether it's race or by technology or even by professional type of fields, because there is also a data professionals group. There are programming groups related to C# and various things. So you can start networking in those groups. The same type of groups exist on LinkedIn. Also, if you're posting about whatever technologies that you're using and or working with on LinkedIn, you'll eventually start to draw a crowd of people that also use those technologies, and then you can network that way as well. I learned Python in like 13 months, and some people can do that. Everybody's not equipped to learn programming like that. What do you think of the React framework? I have no thoughts on that because I'm not as familiar with it, so I can't really speak to it. Do you think it'd be worthwhile to go to a computer science degree? Yes. Why bother listing HTML, CSS, or Bootstrap? Because of the fact if you are going to do web development, those are things that you need to be able to identify, or the employer needs to be able to identify. There are some people who know how to build JavaScript applications, but they suck at doing HTML and or CSS. And so they will do all of the stuff hypothetically, they will build a React application using HTML, but no CSS because they don't know how to format stuff in CSS. Bootstrap or Tailwind? I will say Bootstrap because I know it. I am not familiar with Tailwind. Why no bootcamp? Because from my experience, from what I've seen, people will take a bootcamp, spend $5,000 or so on a bootcamp, and they think they can teach you everything you need to know related to whatever it is you're trying to learn within a 3 to 6 month period. You're not going to master 3 to 6 months. You're not going to master what I know in 3 to 6 months when I have a 4-year degree even with just a 4-year degree knowledge. You're not going to master what I know in 3 to 6 months and try to outcompete me with my 4-year degree. I'm starting to learn C#, but I want to learn C++. What's the best compiler to use? If you know C# and you're familiar with Visual Studio, I would say stick with Visual Studio. Visual Studio does have I think it's called an add-on, or it may be an extension. I could be wrong. But either one of those, you can do C++ within Visual Studio. I took a boot camp, but the market is trash right now. Possibly. And I've seen a lot of... Here's the thing. When people say the IT market is trash, I typically tell the people that when they say that, it gives off you're only looking at FANG companies. IT is at every company, and if a company doesn't have IT in it, it must be a mom and pop that's still using pen and paper to keep track of their accounting software or keep track of their accounting. That being said, you got to get away from the FANG companies. And if you get away from the FANG companies, you will find jobs in IT. Is PHP dead? Nope. It is very still relevant and is still heavily used. Burrow, I worked in a server admin Active Directory. I worked as a server admin in Active Directory managing networking. What is Linux version? I'm assuming you're asking what Linux version I prefer. So I prefer Ubuntu, and that's just because I'm familiar with it. But even if it's any kind of Debian based, I'm pretty good with that. Is the MVC fat pattern being phased out? Not from what I've seen. I'm actually working on a project now that has MVC structure in it. So no, I think it'll still be relevant. There are variations of MVC that now exist, and the traditional setup of MVC is not. If you depending on who you ask, they'll say that the MVC violates several of the solid patterns, like the separation of concerns. But is it being phased out? No. I learned Python and now I'm learning C++. I'm doing an internship this summer. That's great, Ed, or E4. I'm sorry. Do you think we will see a rise of attacks on sites as they are built by AI? Yes. But it's not so much, it won't necessarily, all the attacks will not necessarily be by AI. Some of them will be by humans who are using AI to more so do their DDoS style attacks. So you might have one person sitting at a computer and they have multiple virtual machines, and they may say, all right, tell the AI to start the thing, and then the AI will go spin up multiple virtual machines to then execute the code that it has written by the human. So yeah, I do see more attacks occurring. That's more important to why you should be safe and safeguarding your data. How much C++ could I learn in 2 years studying about 6 days a week, 3 hours a day? It depends. Some people build full on desktop applications out of it. Some people do a lot of stuff with microcontrollers. I just have one right here, ESP. I mean, you can build a whole lot of stuff. Did you just get braces? No, I've had them for almost 2 years now. What did I go to school for? I originally started out school for electrical engineering. Then I changed to management information systems, and I graduated with a business degree and minor in computer science. WebStorm is fire for web development. I've never tried it. You ever try out Smalltalk? No. I got a C++ final coming up. How should I study? Practice writing code. So I don't know if you have access to, but if you know a student that previously took that same class that you're taking now, ask them if they still have their notes. If they do, then you can study the exams and review their notes to prepare for that exam. I had a CS 124 class. It was the second level C++ programming class that the way it was set up was that, come to find out, so myself being a member of NSBE, we had we called it the NSBE Lounge in college. So in the NSBE Lounge, we had a file cabinet. I think it was like 2 or 3 file cabinets that once you took a class, you could put your notes in that file cabinet for future students to review. So I went to the file cabinet and I found the last 6 final exams for CS 124. Come to find out, they rotated on like a 8-year basis of the exams. Or they rotated the questions out. And so literally the answer to some of the questions was in the exams that I was able to get a copy of. On top of that, my CS 124 class, the final exam was open book, open notes. So I literally had the answers to majority of the test. So yeah, try that out. Dog, how does use context work within React? I can't speak to React because I don't use it. But the setup is given broke. Okay. The C# and C++ work off the same Same .NET framework. You can set it up to use. Well, no, it breaks down to the .NET Common Language Runtime, and so you can. It can be set up that way, but believe it or not, Windows is actually written in C++ still, because we had a guy that one of the senior developers for Windows at the NSBE conference, and he was talking about how they wanted to change Windows from being written in C++ to C#. And so, but yeah, all of that compiles down, if you're using Visual Studio, compiles down to the .NET runtime. Excuse me, not .NET runtime, the .NET CLI, or Common Language Interface, or something like that nature, and then that goes there. to build out specific to what you got. Have you ever felt imposter syndrome in your 10 years of experience? Yes. There are a number of ways that you got to combat that, though. One of which is not beating yourself up for feeling inferior, and then also being able to just keep yourself, knowing how to motivate yourself so that you don't have imposter syndrome. Ahmad, what's up? All is good. Would you recommend cybersecurity stress level wise? In this day and age, I'm gonna say no. And I say that because of the fact a lot of people are, those that are in cybersecurity are constantly having to respond to threats as they come in. Even right now, I got this letter sitting on my desk from AT&T that they just sent. Granted, they sent the text message not too long after it happened, but they sent the letter in the mail today for me to be able to sign up for free credit monitoring for the next 2 years because of their data breach that they identified back in March. So, yeah, cybersecurity, that is a high stress level job, in my opinion. I accidentally got a senior web development role as my first tech job. Should I look forward to another senior job? If you are doing good at what you are at right now, Hurley, then yes. But if you're struggling, you may want to take a step back. Burrow, when I got my first apartment, I used Linux Live Disk to decrypt my neighbor's password. You are something else. Ahmad, I'm about to start college, going to major into info systems. Does it get me high-paying jobs? It can. A lot of it depends on your experience level, how you apply yourself, and how well do you interview. A lot of people don't take that into consideration of how well do you interview. But if you suck at interviewing, you're less likely to get the job. So you may need to do mock interviews, or you may need to apply for jobs that you know you don't want just so you can get the practice of interviewing. Is there discrimination in tech? Yes. Just like any other field, tech is no different. So Eagle says, so you're smart. I consider myself smart, but I'm no Einstein. Brett, what are your thoughts on computer engineering? It is a good field. Personally, if you like working with hardware, you'll be great at it. If you don't like working with hardware, you may want to consider something else. Mittens, what cert should I take to get my foot in the door? That is a very wide open question. You first need to identify what field you want to do, whether it's cybersecurity or software development, and then from there you can figure out what certifications. What boot camps do you recommend? New Age Wall Street. I do not recommend boot camps because of the fact people are, at least from what I've talked to, struggle to get through boot camps, and even when they do, they still struggle to get a job after the fact. Dala, you are an inspiration. Thank you. Thoughts, already asked that. Thought exercise. Think of PowerPC and Wind River. What face is made? I don't know what that is. Dude, tech is so cool. It literally runs the world. Yes, it does. Have you taken the CCSP? No, I have not. I think you mean CSSP, but either way, no, I haven't. I'm not in the cybersecurity aspect of things, so one thing I did look into is taking certifications related to Azure, but and then last year I did take the Foundations of C# certification and got that. So, but no. Skill set 3670, easy first language to learn. I'm an electrical engineer and I want to get into programming in the power sector ATM. So C++, you're gonna in if EE, and I'm not sure how your course objective was, but when I was in electrical engineering, they were teaching C++. So I would say start with C++ because a lot of your control systems, like this here, which is an ESP32, does run on C++. From there, you may venture into other programming languages. Like I actually had a class, electrical engineering class, where we learned VHDL, which was used to program microchips on circuit boards. So, and by microchips, I mean like the black thing that's right there. So VHDL was another language. NYC Plumber Guy, you're welcome. That's the point of these lives, is to share knowledge. Edmund, C++ does not require the .NET framework. C# does. Yes, but that's correct, but it does compile down to that .NET runtime, or through that runtime, so that it can be built accordingly. What if HTML was a code? What if it was? Curly brace on the same line as if or on the line below. That depends on the programming language. PHP, the standards dictate that it should be on the same line as the if. In C Sharp, the C Sharp standards dictate that it should be on a separate line. So it just depends. Anyone can learn. Can anyone learn a program, or is it hard to learn? Anyone can learn a program. However, some people, what I tell people is programming requires a logical mindset. If you don't have that, you're going to struggle. C++ is greater than C Sharp. That can be debated very strongly. How long does it take to learn a programming language, I'm assuming, and get a job in it? That depends on how much you apply yourself. That type of thing is very relative on you, because some people are great at picking up programming languages. Some people struggle. I remember back in college, I would help people get through their programming classes. They don't do programming today because of the fact they never had any interest in it, and because of the fact they also struggled in that class. They just needed to pass the class because they were required to take like one computer science elective or something like that nature. C Sharp, do they hate their team? No, at least I don't. Silver X, I have an internship starting in about 4 weeks that uses C++, which I've never learned, but I could. I'm assuming there's another part about that. That being said, yeah, you just want to practice C++. In the meantime, you're going to learn what you need to know for the internship on the internship, but there are some common things you would already know those, otherwise you probably wouldn't be able to get the internship. Bow 2, currently procrastinating on my coding languages final. Any chance you know much about Lisp? Unfortunately, no, I don't. What do you think about the tech job market? That if you are looking for a job in tech, you need to not go to a tech company. That's the problem now, is tech has gotten to a point where AI has stepped in, and AI, while it is doing some of the work, AI is not doing everything. People need to understand that there are tech jobs at non-tech companies. Every company has IT. Go find one and get hired. Java Gang, hey, I was there at one point. I got out of Java because I changed jobs, and the job now does C Sharp. Cyber here would not recommend, and it's not for everybody. I will say that is stress, that it can be stressing. Are you learning new languages? I am not. I am actually trying to learn frameworks. Cake PHP is a framework that I'm kind of really working my way through right now so that I can build PHP-based applications, because I know how to build C Sharp applications, but I want to expand that a little bit further. Read carefully. Signing it may waive your rights away to prosecute. I'm not sure what that is in response to. As a newer dev, never worked on PHP. Just curious if you ever enjoyed the language. Yeah, I mean, the same thing. PHP, although it does have, in more recent years, PHP has become more object-oriented, but for me, it works. It has a similar syntax as C Sharp and C++, which is what I'm used to, in addition to Java, which I'm also used to. And you can now more so set up things just like a C Sharp or C++ or Java application, where you're using classes and objects and so forth. I am in cybersecurity now. Stress is high. Yeah, that's typically with cybersecurity. Is GPT coding correctly in your opinion? It can be hit or miss. You need to be able to verify what is presenting to you and make sure that it actually works. Are coding bootcamps still worth it? Not in my opinion. I would rather suggest people to get an associate's degree. If you're going to do anything and pay for something, get a degree, even if it is just an associate's degree. What about offensive security? I want to work on a purple team. Is that high stress? It can be. Ironically, I know what purple team means, but at the same time, it's probably going to be, because of the fact, in this day and age, we have AI that is capable of hacking machines, and we also have people who reside on the dark web that also want to get the data that they shouldn't have access to. I use Wireshark and Kane to be able to do that. Okay. Any interview advice? Practice. If you're not sure, do mock interviews. Apply for jobs so that you can interview for jobs that you know you don't want, just so you can practice for the interview. Bureau, I can't really talk. That's why I'm jobless. Well, you got to work on that because nobody's going to hire you if you can't communicate. Like communication is like one of those things that you gotta have it. It is a soft skill, as they commonly refer to it. T, is there any way to bypass CORS using JavaScript to make cross-site API calls? Well, if you're really intentionally trying to make cross-site API calls, you may want to reconsider that because of the fact it proposes a security risk that most, well, at least Firefox and I think Chrome actually will automatically block. So if you're having to do cross-site scripting, what I would actually do is say have your JavaScript front end communicate to your application's back end, and then that back end go makes a call to whatever other site that front end communicate to your application's back end, and then that back end go makes a call to whatever other site that. All right, TikTok decided to crash, so let's see where I can pick up at. Can someone tell me if I have a chance of working as a full stack dev or some sort of higher paying job right out of high school? It is unlikely unless you have years of experience. And I don't know where you're at in high school, so it's kind of difficult to say. Mason, going to work at a company that use VBA mostly. Thoughts on it? It's still relevant. However, you may not want to stay at the company that long because VBA is on its way out the door. Love listening to you talk about these topics. Thank you. Sounds like more computer engineering with coding than electrical engineering. Explain the diff. Computer engineering is the actual coding of the hardware. So this thing right here, it has code on it to be able to function. That would be the computer engineering. The electrical engineering would be the actual setting up of the circuits and wiring things together, doing all the soldering, that type of thing. So that's the difference between the two. B Carb, we just had delegates tossed at us and they have my codes out all a week. Okay. Is there much use for generic classes in the industry? I don't know what you mean by generic, like programming classes or something else. Look up the STAR method for interviews. Yes. STAR. I forgot what the acronyms mean, but yes. What does interviewer mean when they ask what project are you working on? How would you respond? I would, if you have a project that you're working on, you would answer it truthfully. I mean, no sense in making a shame of it. Now, I wouldn't necessarily talk about if you're doing freelance projects for someone else. I wouldn't necessarily talk about those as much as if I was doing a project that I was building and or maintaining for myself. Favorite Linux distro? I currently use Ubuntu for all the things. If not, it's some sort of Debian-based system because I do have some Raspberry Pi things. Do you have any knowledge on control systems? I do have a little bit. He says he hates VBA. Yeah, I can agree. I am not. I've done VBA, but that is not my go-to. Can I use Maths Debater? I've never heard of it. What should I learn first, C++ or C#? I'm going to be honest with you, C# is more cross-platform and you can do more with it in C++. However, either one of those, you can't go wrong. How does learning Linux open doors in your career? Majority of the world's websites run on Linux. That being said, if you know Linux, you can get a job at majority of the places that have a IT. And as I mentioned earlier, every company has some sort of IT unless they are ran by somebody who still does their accounting with pen and paper. Do you have to be a math wizard to be an electrical engineer? No, but you do have to be able to do math. I wouldn't necessarily say wizard, but I know you have to be good at math. The electrical engineering curriculum when I was at the University of Alabama required that you take calculus 1, 2, and 3 in addition to differential equations and statics. Not statistics, statics. Statistics is a business class. So you do need to be proficient at it, but you don't necessarily need to know everything about it. What device is a Raspberry Pi? Great question. This is a Raspberry Pi. It's inside of a case. That being said, though, it is a full-blown computer. It has a memory card down here at the bottom. And it's a memory card. It's a computer the size of a credit card. And I have currently this LCD screen hooked up to it. You can write whatever programs on there, and it runs a full-blown operating system, can connect to your network, and also has Bluetooth built in, and you have the ability to add a display screen and a whole bunch of other stuff to it. Have you ever used modern language like Zig, Go, Rust, etc.? No, I haven't. Thoughts on cybersecurity major? You will always have a job because there will always be somebody trying to hack somebody else. Situations, task, action, result. Yes, that is the STAR method. Thank you. I would start working with AI if you would want to start programming. The future is coming. Yes, definitely work with AI. I use AI. I use ChatGPT specifically, the free version, to assist me in some of the coding issues that I have. And sometimes it gets it right. Sometimes it's a little bit off. That being said, though, definitely I do agree with practicing. Do you think multi-factor authentication truly protects companies from cyber attack? To an extent, it reduces the likelihood of an attack. I won't say it will stop everything, but it does reduce that chance. Grilled cheese, laundry basket. All right, have a good night. Thank you for joining. Linux is highly sought after. Yes, it is, and that's why I said majority of the world's servers run on Linux. So if you know Linux, you will be great. Any advice or a controls electrical engineering internships interview as a CE? While I do know how to build control systems, I don't have much advice for interviewing. Be able to read a schematic is one thing that I would say when it comes to electrical engineering, and that's just from what I know about the electrical engineering field. Know your voltages and be able to differentiate the various symbols on a schematic. Multi-factor authentication, everything. I'm not using SMS as text. Multi-factor authentication is dying. I would disagree because multi-factor authentication, especially with the number of hacking attempts that exist today, is still going to be a thing. And in some cases, we may actually have three-factor authentication for more secure assets. And I know three-factor authentication seems extreme, but it may get to that point where you got to have it, else your data is at risk. Should I learn Unity to code games? Sure, why not? Can it run Doom? I don't know what you're talking about. How hard was Calculus 3 compared to Calculus 2? I don't know, because I changed my major and I took Calculus 2. Calculus 1, one thing that I learned about myself is I can do algebra and I can do it great. Calculus, not so much. Burrow, those things are so cool. I like to get one and learn. Yes, Raspberry Pis are cool. What job are you in? I do software development. I'm a graduate for cybersecurity. Congratulations, smile for you. Daniel, I've been looking for a mobile module that has MP3 and a relay built in. Do you know of any? I don't know of any that has the ability to play audio with a relay, but I do have a relay. I mean, to be honest with you, you can take, like, this is a 4-channel mechanical relay board. You can take the Raspberry Pi, connect this up to this, and with Python, C# or some, C# or some other programming language, you can get the Raspberry Pi to control the relays. Calculus 3 was easier than Cal 2. For me, I got an AS. It got A's in Cal 1 and 3, but a C in Cal 2. Well, I'm going to go ahead and be honest with you. I failed Cal 1 the first time. I took it at junior college, made a B. Took Cal 2, failed that. So I was like, nope, this ain't it. How can I break into cybersecurity? I would say you start with a home lab and set up all the, I don't know the specific tools that they use, but looking into penetration testing and firewalls and so forth. Opinion on AWS. It's like the same thing with anything else. AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, they're all the same thing. It's just the pricing is what makes it different. Have you worked as a software engineer before? I'm currently my job title is actually program analyst, but I do software engineering, basically. You look good, bro. Thank you, that person. What's up? I got a design challenge interview tomorrow. Do you know what it's going to entail? I would not know. This would be a better question to whoever you're interviewing with. That being said, though, it could be designing interview. Like, that's not, you didn't provide enough information to kind of narrow it down. That being said, you could be designing software. You could be talking about design patterns. Yeah, I don't really know to be able to provide that. Apple user, can you please give an example of three-factor? Well, it's basically two-factor authentication with another factor. So you know what two-factor authentication is, and for those of you that don't, basically you log into a website and they send you a text message or they send you an email. And then if you want to do three-factor, you would then have something else. So like they might send you a text for the second factor, and then you might have to go to this other thing, like you get an email, and that would be the third factor. So there's multiple ways of verifying you are who you are. SMS is dying though. Big players are using other methods, including MS is sunsetting text SMS. And yeah, that's what I say. It may get to a point where, like, I know a lot of them were using email at one point. Granted, email, in some cases, people were getting their email hacked before they were getting these other accounts hacked. And so they already had the secondary authentication there. And then in regards to the SMS, text messaging authentication, some people are actually getting their SIM cards hacked, or compromised, or getting their phone numbers reassigned, and that's a whole different type of thing. Have you used SIEM? No, I haven't. What degree did I graduate with? A business degree and minored in computer science. What do you look for in a man? I'm not looking for a man. Is it worth getting a master's in management information systems? Depends on what you want to do with that. If you're trying to do project management or even just software development, sure. Cybersecurity, probably not so much. If you're doing cybersecurity, you want to lean towards getting certifications and not so much a master's. Although I will say that having a master's is not will still get you a job. I'll put it that way. Breaking into cyber really depends on what you want to do. Find free resources for Security Plus. I agree, and always keep learning. I agree with Nighthawk on that one. Do you believe computer science is the most valuable degree? Not necessarily, because there are a number of degrees now. I mean, there are degrees in AI, there are degrees in software engineering, there are degrees in computer science, there are degrees in information systems. None of those degrees are more valuable than the other. And while that, yes, it could be argued about that, at the same time, though, you have to understand that you can get one degree and then go into a completely different field. What software languages did you learn in order to get hired? So the current job that I have, I actually knew Java, and this job uses C#. So I actually learned C# on the job. I didn't learn it before I got the job. That being said, if you know your general IT knowledge, you can possibly get a job anywhere. You're not committed to having to know everything beforehand. Looking to get into IT, where should I start to see if I like it? You're going to need to research what you would like to do within IT, and then from there, watch videos, because there's plenty of videos about the various aspects of IT online, and then see what those people say. There are also blogs about people talking about what they do in their IT-related careers. Once you see all of that, you can then make a decision. What's up, Keith? I have AWS certification and a master's in MIS. How can I break in? If you have those two credentials and you're struggling to break in, there's something not related to your credentials that is actually the problem, whether it be your interview skills, your communication skills, or something else. That being said, you got qualifications, something else is wrong. Computer science isn't that important no more since AI thing is now software engineer over CS. Computer science versus software engineer, to be honest with you, those degrees are, while some people will argue that they're different, from a hiring perspective, they are seen as similar, if not the same. Just depends on the company. All right, and we have, whoops, that is not what I meant to do. All right, and I've caught up with all the questions. What two credentials are you talking about? I just joined. I was talking about two-factor authentication, and you can have multiple different types of ways of authenticating. How do you break in with no experience? You got to get experience, Smarty Mar. Whether it's building your own portfolio and using that to leverage, but it is very difficult for someone to be willing to let you in when you have no experience. So you got to be willing to build your experience. You got to be able to document that experience. Like this, me talking to you about tech and doing this live stream, this is me documenting. So if anybody ever questioned, like, hey, you don't know tech, I'll be like, you know what? I got a live stream that I did talking about it that supports that I know this stuff. All right. How do I become better at interviews? You got to practice. So if there is a community college near you or even a career center, correction, not a community college. If there is a career center, because typically every state has some sort of career center, go find that career center, call them up, like, hey, I need to practice my interviewing skills, and let them, set you up, and you go and do the mock interviews. If not, the alternative to that, because I had a manager back when that would, he was like, every year he would go on interviews for the main purpose of practicing, because him not having a degree means he had a greater chance of being laid off or anything else of that nature. So to better always have himself ready, he would go on interviews once a year with no intentions of actually taking the job, but with every intention of practicing his interviewing skills. Good luck on your journey. Thanks. I don't know if that was to me or to someone else, but yes. Did you ever find it challenging landing a job? Did you find many black people in the industry? Ooh, that's a deep question. Challenging to find a job at one point, yes. But I realized, and this is more of a bigger aspect of things, I hadn't done interviews in a while. Like, I hadn't sat on the other side of the interview desk, being the interviewer. Yeah, the person getting interviewed. But I was the one doing the interviews. So having to transition and get that thought process ready, and to be able to do that, it did take a moment. There were some interviews that I know I bombed, and they even told me, it's like, yeah, we don't think you're it. So, but at the same time, because I went on a series of interviews, it was like a stepping stone to where I ultimately was getting to, which was to get to the interview that I actually got the job for. So, practice. Do you find many black people in the industry? It depends. Where I'm currently at now, the majority of people that work, at least in that department, they're black. I've held jobs where the majority of people were not black. To be honest with you, and some, depending on the company, the majority were of Indian descent. And not by Indian, I don't mean Native American. I mean people from India. That being said, it will vary. The previous company that I worked for, they hired people who needed visas. So we had an influx of, or a larger number of people who are of Indian descent and that were not native to the U.S. Where I'm currently at, they don't hire people directly that require visas. They get those through contractors. And so they'll hire a contractor, but hire directly? No. So it will vary. Better than me doing this live. I will assume I still know nothing after 9 years later. And, that's the thing, right? Tech is always evolving. So what 9 years ago is not the same now, right? But at the same time, that doesn't mean you're bad at it, right? You just have to stay relevant. Nighthawk, my first boss just told me to do it at like 1 to 2 interviews every 6 months to keep my skills fresh. Yes. And I know for me, like, I don't do the interview thing that often, right? So what I instead do, I'm in Toastmasters. And some people have heard Toastmasters, some people haven't. What Toastmasters prepares you for is public speaking. Whether that's speaking one-on-one, speaking to a large crowd. If you can speak to a crowd, you can speak to somebody one-on-one. Like I'm speaking to you all now, I can't see you all. However, I can articulate myself in a way that everybody can understand and be able to practice the same things that I've learned in the Toastmasters meeting here with you on the live. And in the event that I have to go to an interview, those same skills kick in, because speaking is speaking regardless of what environment that you're doing it in, whether it's 2 people or 1,000 people, you're still speaking. And if you do that same thing consistently, regardless of the size of the audience, you'll be great. Captain Coben, how do I leverage my 3 years working at a startup to get a 5-6 figure tech job? You have to be able to know your stuff. You have to be able to talk well and be able to communicate those things well. The biggest thing is being able to sell yourself. If you can't sell yourself, you're going to do a bad job. Nighthawk, that sounds amazing. Thank you. Cameron just got into a program for A Plus, Security Plus, and Net Plus certifications. Is there anything else that I should learn? So here's the thing, right? You're in a program with 3 certifications. Right now, you need to get through those 3 certifications and then try to learn something else. But that being said, before you try to figure out what you need to do next, you need to figure out what certification to get next. You need to figure out what is your career goal. The problem that I see is people will get all these certifications. They'll get an AWS, they'll get an Azure, and they'll get a Google Cloud. And they'll have them. Nothing's wrong with that. They'll be able to talk with people about them. But because their certifications are all over the place and not specific into a certain set or a certain area or expertise or narrow set, they don't get hired. And this is one thing that a interviewer told me. He was like, you know a lot of programming languages, but your knowledge is very wide and shallow. And likewise, if you have all these certifications, your knowledge will be wide, but it will be shallow, because there's no way you're going to be able to know all of those things and be able to get deep knowledge. That interviewer also told me, he's like, because your knowledge is wide and shallow, yeah, you know how to do the stuff, but you should really consider pivoting and being an expert so that you have deep knowledge in a limited set. That said, get your certifications that you're doing now, but don't just go get certifications for the sake of getting them. How long do you typically stay at a job? As long as necessary. I have other things outside of that job that, if in the worst case scenario something were to happen, laid off, fired, you get the idea, that those other avenues that I have set up, I could go full time in those if I really wanted to. Those are good bases, but yeah, you need to focus on what you want to do. And I agree. And that's where a lot of people I want to get into tech. What do you want to do? I don't know. I just want to be in the tech. And I'm like, you don't have the vision that you need to have to be successful, and you wonder why you're struggling. Marty Marr, are y'all hiring? I'm not, but yeah, there's always a position that needs to be filled. I became the tech director for my school district with no tech background. Where do I start? How did you become the tech director with no background? Thank you for the heart. I forgot who that was. How did you become the tech director with no tech background? And more so, that is a question you should have asked before you started that position. I hate to be honest with you, but that's the truth. All right, so user with a bunch of numbers says, also got I've newly graduated with an English degree and currently learning Python. How can I get on? You're going to have to master Python, and then you're probably going to need the other programming language. And I say that because of the fact Python is not necessarily used at large corporations to the extent that some people may want you to believe. Typically, things like C#, C++, Java are used at larger corporations, and then from there, you can get a bigger corporation job or even government job. But Python is typically, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, used by a lot more by startups instead of well-established companies. TX Technician, I've got this problem. I know way too little about too much. Yeah, and that's a common problem. And that's why I made that emphasis of specialize. And so when people ask me, if you were on earlier, hey, do you know about Java? Do you know about all these other things? No. Why? Because I've been told narrow your skill set. And so what I've done over the years is to narrow my skill set. How have I done that? I've taken some of my, like I had some software that I managed in or written in Java. I took that Java, rewrote it to C Sharp, and pushed it back out there to GitHub. So, what does that mean? That means I know I'm well versed to know how to convert one language to the other. But if somebody just looks at that without going to the commit history, what are they going to see? They're going to see a C Sharp developer because the code, the latest version of that code, is written in C Sharp. Nighthawk, if you want to work in networking, go for Cisco certs. Do want to do cybersecurity? Do something like CYSA plus. Yeah. Thank you, Tobias, for the gifts. Small school district taught teachers to use tech, was Google admin, Cisco administrator already. Okay, so that being said, you'll really want to consider what objectives that you want to accomplish. Like, what problems did you see in the roles that you were in before you became the tech director? All right, had to do the verification. What roles do you want to, what issues existed before you got into the position that you were in? Those would be where you should start, in my opinion. So I'm sure there was something with the Google administration or the Cisco systems that you didn't like. Now that you're the boss, you fix the things that you don't like. And if you do that correctly, you'll then see other challenges and issues as they come about, and then you address those and you keep going. Marty Marr, I have experience documented on my GitHub, but still can't get anything. What do I do? You probably need to network. And by network, I mean get on LinkedIn. If you're doing, just because you have stuff on GitHub, is that stuff being kept up to date, or do you just put it out there once and let it be? Because here's the thing. Some people have stuff, and I emphasize, yeah, you can have private projects on GitHub, but I'm not talking about the private stuff. I'm talking about the public stuff. Are you committing to a public repository where other people who are looking for whatever it is that you do can go to your GitHub and see that information? If the answer is no, then you need to start committing to public repositories. You also need to network, because if you're looking for a job and you can't get a job, but you have the experience, the only other issue with that is, well, there could be several others, but I'll say this, there's several issues that could be a problem. You don't know how to network, you don't know how to communicate, or you interview poorly. Now, which one is that? I don't know, because I don't know you well enough to be able to say which one it is. However, I will say that it's one of those things, and once you realize that, you will then work on that part of it. So if you don't have a strong network, go on LinkedIn, start commenting on posts. And I emphasize commenting on posts and not just liking them, because of the fact your name will show up, more likely to show up if you comment versus you just liking or doing some reaction. How do we get older, inept people to adopt new emerging technologies? Sometimes you just have to let the stuff that's there fail for them to force them to do the new thing. I was told about the story of how we got to where the systems currently are. What was happening was, so at some point, and I don't know the exact years, but there was a mainframe. Our department had a mainframe. The mainframe started seeing its last days. You know, you have disk errors and stuff like that nature starting to happen. And it wasn't as simple as, hey, just go get another hard drive and drop in it, because of the fact this hardware was also outdated. Because the hardware was outdated, you had to have specific hardware to work, hard drives to work with that hardware. They weren't making those hard drives anymore. So what do? And it got to a point where it's like, all right, we got to migrate the data. So they started taking backups. I think they were taking weekly, if not daily, backups of the data just in case the hard drive was to fail. At the same time, there was an expedited effort to rewrite the existing applications to new software systems. And ultimately, they got things moved over. However, it wasn't easy. And so sometimes you got to just let things fail till, let them force. ChatGPT can help a ton. Yes, it can. But you have to know how to use it, and you have to know what it's telling you in return. Would you rather be good at many things or master at one? Master at one. That was the previous set of comments I was responding to earlier about how I was told that I should be great at a handful of things instead of a master at a lot of things. Do you find much success with finding, landing side jobs and temporary contracts? As far as my tech stuff, not so much because I don't market myself to that extent. But I do have a number of tech projects that I'm working on, and there seems to be an audience that is interested in watching those things. C#, we talking music? No, we're talking programming, software. Not C#, aka D flat. What am I working on now? So my Christmas light stuff is always a year-round project. I was working on one of the sequences that I want to add to this year's show. I'm also trying to do some holiday lighting stuff. So I have some landscape lights that I have set up now, but I want to add more so that I can do more colors at the same time. So that's why I have the ESP32 out here in addition to the solid state relay board sitting out here. So the Christmas lighting thing is always an ongoing project. Firewall training is just networking, learn networking basics. I would agree. Do I do consultations? Yes, for a fee. But if you got questions, like you said, you got questions, just send a message. Crowdsourcing, Marty, what you got? Yeah, or you could crowdsource. What kind of tech? I personally work in C#, but I also do all kinds of other things. CDP or LLDP? I do not know what those are because I do not do networking type stuff, unfortunately. Not to that extent. How can someone get into tech? I'm 22 from Texas. You need to first identify what do you want to do in tech. That is the answer I give to anybody that asks that question. Because tech is a very wide field. Some people want to do software development. Some people want to do cybersecurity. Some people don't like programming. And they get to a point where they realize, I hate programming. And so they go and they become project managers. That way they're still working with tech, but they're not doing programming. Working for an MSP is a great way to start, trial by fire, but you learn a crazy amount. I can agree with that because I used to work for an MSP for Fannie Mae. And let's just say I got very familiar with Linux and Solaris very quickly because pretty much majority of the applications that I was assigned to support ran on Solaris, which if you do not know, Solaris is based on Unix, just like Linux is based on Unix. Jack of all trades is better than a master of none. Not in every scenario, unfortunately. Have you heard of developers having AM, PM jobs? Are these prevalent? I've heard of people doing 2 full-time jobs, but in my opinion, it is if you have the ability to have 2 full-time jobs, that means you're probably not doing anything else with your life. Nothing wrong with that, in my opinion, but the biggest issue with that is long as your 2 full-time jobs do not overlap, you should be fine. It has passed the top of the hour. I will let this thing go about another 5 minutes or so, and we'll call it quits. Thank you for the reminder. LinkedIn handle is K Robinson Tech. So working in C#. That comment moved. So working in C#, does that mean you work in SharePoint? I am not a dev, so I don't know about it. No. You can do C# without having to know SharePoint. SharePoint is SharePoint. The experience that I have with SharePoint grinds my gears. That being said, though, you can build a lot of stuff with C# and never have to look at SharePoint. I've built applications for personal use, no interactions with C#. Now you can do some stuff with SharePoint in C#, but it's not a requirement. Solaris is older than me. I don't think I can say the same. I think Solaris came out in the 90s or maybe the 80s, but I could be wrong. What do you know about NAS systems? I know a little bit. I wouldn't say my knowledge is deep. I specialize in VR, want to make video games for a living. What do you think of XR and its uses? I am not familiar with XR, so I can't speak to that. Marty Mar just sent the message. Cool. I will respond to that after this. I use C# to build mobile apps such as Xamarin. Yes, I've heard of people doing that. But the way C# has evolved now with the .NET platform is that everything is a console application that you build with C#. Even the web sites and web applications, web APIs, all of that stuff, all of those things are console applications. The websites and the web APIs are console applications that can receive requests from the internet. Even pretty much everything else, yeah, is going to be web based. I have a feeling that a lot of these you'll need a web browser, but there are some desktop applications that will no longer need to be desktop applications. And believe it or not, even Teams actually is built on top of a web-based framework. So Teams is not even, although it is a desktop application in how it appears, and when you really look under the hood, Teams is more so a browser, web browser, based on how it actually architecturally functions. Are people still using Swift? I believe so, but I'm not sure. Are you affiliated to MSU? I have no idea what MSU is. I do have to disagree. I'm a staff full stack engineer for a top defense contractor, and it helps. Disagree with what exactly? All right, and I'll be ending this at 15 past the hour. So get your last set of questions in and/or comments. Oh, MSU. Okay, I know what you mean. K, the letter K, Robinson, Robinson, Tech, Tech. All right, so last few questions. What am I building with C Sharp? At work, we build web applications. So it has an API backend with a MVC front end. And it's not a true MVC front end because there's no models in. No, well, yeah, there's no models. The front end communicates to the back end to make API calls. Some of the personal projects that I've built with C Sharp was to. I had an application that was doing some of the data information, sending data related to the Christmas lights that I run. Um, that being said, though, I've actually started to rewrite that in PHP because other people have wanted to use the same set of applications for their Christmas light stuff. So instead of trying to give them, granted, the source code for this is open source, but a lot of people are not going to understand how to install a C# application unless it comes with an installer. And I didn't feel like writing an installer, so I just said I'll create an open source app or a kind of open source application that can do what my show does. Yes, I did receive your connection request. Do you follow any AI companies? No, I don't. Being a jack of all trades is a good thing, my friend. Lets you do a lot of things. It does, but there's limits to it, right? You really want to consider how much is too much. And I say that because of the fact, yeah, you can do everything, but if you do everything, and I see this with myself sometimes, it's like I don't touch certain things because of the fact those things are not in my wheelhouse. So, so yeah, knowing a lot is great, but trying to do everything makes you not as great as it probably could be. Am I running the application in the cloud? Not yet. I'm still building it locally, but the plan would be to run it. It would be a website that other people would have access to be able to manage their light shows and to be able to accept requests from people who want to see those Christmas light shows and so forth. Sort of a personal question, but what's your ideal job situation in the future? What's your end goal? I'm doing software development, so that is the end goal. Ideally, I would get requests in and be able to request to me directly, not through an employer, to be able to build whatever needs to be built. I haven't gotten there yet, but that in the long range would be the plan. All right, last couple of questions. Will I be able to get a job with a A+, Security Plus, and Net Plus, and can learn while at the job? Possibly. It just depends. From what I've seen, if the job, those type of jobs, so I'll speak to Security Plus. Security Plus, in some cases, is a requirement for a job. That being said, some companies won't hire you until you get the Security Plus. Some companies will give you 6 months to get the Security Plus. That being said, you can do the on-the-job learning, but it's better that you go into that job meeting all the requirements instead of trying to get that job, be put on probation for 3 to 6 months, and still struggle to get the requirements met, and then you end up getting kicked off to that job. All right, last question, Captain Coben. I think if you the skills, if you are good at the skills that you are adjacent to each other, you can complement more. Yeah, I think I kind of get what you're saying. So if the skills you got are complementary to something else, then you'll be good. Yes. But what I'm talking about is when it comes to that jack of all trades comment, is that you have people that are in one field and they're trying to cross over to something completely different. The cybersecurity person that has been maintaining firewalls using the graphical interface all of a sudden wants to become a database administrator and write SQL queries full time. Those things are not relevant. And not saying that it can't be done, because there are some roles where you have to you have to be able to wear multiple hats and be able to be functional or be able to think in multiple functional areas. Such as when I worked in IT support or application support, I had to know my application, but I also had to know some stuff at a high level like IP addresses, DNS, how to connect to a database, what is Oracle, and the difference between Oracle and Sybase queries and stuff like that nature. Then there was some stuff like I had to tell the mainframe guy, hey, you got to clear the DNS on the mainframe. He was like, how do I do that? I don't know how to do that, but that's the reason why your application can't connect to mine. And he had to go call somebody else. Then they had to tell him how to do it. And once he figured out what they were telling him, he did what he did, and his application was then able to connect to mine. So, yes, in some aspects, being a jack of all trades can be helpful. In all aspects, not so much. All right, so we have passed the 15 past the hour. I thank you all for joining. Replay of this live stream will be posted on my YouTube channel, Take Talk with RHT Services. So if you want to see this will be there at some point. I don't know the exact date when it'll get released, but it will be there for future replays. In addition to the other previous Tech Talk conversations have been posted there as well. That said, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can message me directly. And we'll see you in the next one.